So grateful to have you, Dr. Radhakrishnan, and you can take over.
Thank you, Dr. Naka. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. It's good to see many of you. Today, I'm going to talk about how I progressed from R21 to R01 and all the insights and tips I've learned over the process. Also, I am a study section reviewer, so some of my insights are also influenced from that, my experience there. I know this is a tough time. I know it is. I know this is a tough time, and it's. But my urge to you is, be mindful of the impact that you're making with your research and focus on the science. And I mean, a lot of the processes are still in place, and as long as sometimes you just need that focus to get ahead. And remember, the end goal is you are doing this for your population, for your target population, for whom you want to make an impact. Okay. So I just want to briefly give on this topic of interest, heart failure. I was very interested in it, but partly because my dad has been diagnosed with heart failure, and he's been living with it for 25 years. So that was my biggest impetus to learn about heart failure. Also, I was a home health nurse, and I would transition people with heart failure to the home setting. So over the years, there's something about heart failure that really fascinated me. Not just the disease, but just the people and the resilience that they bring in with the disease, their urge, their aspiration to live a good life despite the disease, and what the disease can do to bring that down. So I've always been very interested in heart failure research. So as we know, it's still a growing problem. And even with all the advances, I mean, the medical advances, especially the medication advances, are fantastic. And that's letting people live longer. But do they necessarily live a higher quality of life? That is a question. And the sad thing is, with the COVID pandemic and long COVID, if more and more younger people are getting diagnosed with heart failure. So we haven't really won the battle against heart failure. If anything, we're kind of losing it. So we need to continue working on tackling this disease. So there are many ways to tackle this disease. My modus operandi is self-management. So I'm very interested in self-management. I believe that taking good care of yourselves can help you live a better life, even with heart failure. So that's where I do. And I've used a variety of digital tools for self-care. I actually started off my dissertation with telemonitoring of in people with heart failure. I found some gaps there. And then that kind of segued into different digital tools, including use of sensors such as Smart Scales Activity Tracker, and building a game from scratch to motivate people to engage in self-care, because that is the big challenges. We know self-care is good, but how do you get people to engage in self-care? And behavior change, especially human behavior change, is a holy grail, right? It's not perfect, but we continue our quest in there, and every study is a learning experience. We learn from it and we use it in the next one. All right. It's kind of like a context. So I want to briefly talk about this particular research trajectory for mine, which started off like as a junior faculty with a P30 Center grant, a really small grant. And I'm going to talk about how I laid the foundation step by step to reach like more studies. So the P30 was the smallest study, then that led into R21. But I just want you to know this, it was not as straightforward as this thing looked. It was a lot of struggle. So P30 to R21 took me 3 years. It was constant refining and revising and learning and resubmissions and back. So don't be discouraged. Every critique that you get is a learning opportunity, and I took that. So even though I was rejected 3 times before I finally got an R21, it really helped even my later proposal. So that's the way, that's a good attitude about it. So briefly, I want to talk about the first study was a pilot study. There was this idea as around that time, serious games, the concept of serious games was coming up. And I saw that it was being used for children, but absolutely none for older adults. So I think our team was one of the pioneering study that looked into serious games for chronic disease management, especially in older adults, because for something like that, you want to show acceptability and feasibility. More than anything, it was acceptability, because the one thing that I would keep getting is that older adults are not interested in technology. So why would they adopt this? So that's why I had to first demonstrate that. And this initial grant let me do that. We just basically repurposed a casino slot game that was already developed, and we adapted that for heart failure. It only provided education and nothing more. But it was fascinating because we saw that education improved significantly, even in a small sample size, and especially among the people with high school education. So that was really powerful finding. But to transform from that to an R21 took me a while. But I finally I was very interested because a question. Okay. Yeah. So like I said, the knowledge increased significantly. And it was a really simple game, it just was improving knowledge. So when I used to present at presentations, I used to get this question like, well, you improved knowledge, but did they actually engage in behaviors, right? So we didn't know that. So my R21 was, I was really intrigued by the idea of like them not just sitting and playing the game, but actually doing something with their health behaviors. And that's where my next study was, where we had to pilot this getting the data from sensors into a game. And so they play the game, but based on real-time data. So it was a really neat idea. I got a lot of collaborators. And also, I want to share my first team, I had to fire them completely and I had to rebuild a new team. So I've gone through these challenges, but I had this basic idea that this is what I want to do. And I will try to get the team that will help me get to where I want. And so I kept iterating it. And the NIH feedback, critique feedback was helpful. And so that helped me get my next R21. So I had a good mentor. He gave me great advice. The thing about R21 is even when you're doing the R21, you want to think about your R01, because your R21 is basically the stepping stone for an R01. So my R21, I'm putting the same effort that I did with an R01, but it's basically a mini R01 because you want to demonstrate feasibility. And that's why for an R21, if you want to get that funded, one of the main specific aims has to be about feasibility, because that's what an R21 is. It's a feasibility study. So I'm going to talk more about that later, but I just want to lay the ground that it's not like you do an R21 and then you think about an R01. You're basically thinking about your R01 when you're writing your R21. So when you do your R01, you're just removing the feasibility aspect of it and just, having a fully powered sample. Anyway, so in my case, the R21 worked out great. Even though COVID came in between and completely, I had to change my whole worldview of doing the study. We were doing a lot of in-person, and because of COVID, we went completely remote. And then when we went completely remote, I was only focusing on participants from Austin. But when we were completely remote, there was nothing stopping me from recruiting people all over Texas. So that's what we did. So we got people from all over Texas, and it was really interesting to see the results. We got very positive trends where we saw that the game group, the intervention group had really good outcomes when it came to our major behaviors outcomes, such as weighing monitoring and steps. So it was just a matter of submitting that as an R01. And I was doing it really tight. Like as soon as I got the results, even before that, I'd started writing a publication on that, because when they're looking at the R01, they are looking at any publications from the study. And luckily, like with this R21, I had about 5 publications because I publish about every step that, you have like a stakeholder interviews to inform the game design that was published. And then we had the whole game design itself that was published. And then the qualitative interviews. And then this main study. So we had like different things about aspects of conducting the study. So that really helped. But the main study results, I just didn't have enough time to publish it and, it be available for the R01 review team. So I used the option of preprints. So that is something that you might want to think about as preprint, because preprints let you have it online, but it's still not peer reviewed because peer review takes time. But you could still have it as a preprint. So that gives you lets reviewers know that, yes, your study is authentic, complete, and your results are legitimate. All right, so then given that positive findings just helped us to do the next study, which was a completely powered study. So one thing that happens in an R21 is that people often, you don't need the sample size to be fully powered. It's a really small study. You don't need to have a sample size of 100, 200. You can do it with the sample size of like 25 to 50. Because it's just feasibility. You're just demonstrating feasibility because it's a high risk, high reward study. So, and then your R01 is the one where it is fully powered. So based on the estimate effect size, and that estimates will help you inform the power and the sample size for the R01. So that's the way to go. All right, so this was a little bit about mine, and I'm really going to go into just the conceptual differences between an R21 and R01. So think of R21 as the spark, and R01 is the engine. R21 is feasibility and innovation. It's a unique idea. So in my case, this whole sensor data merging into a game for older adults with heart failure was innovative. It was crazy, but innovative. And then, so R21 was feasibility of doing such a study with older people. And I had never planned it to do like this decentralized, fully remote trial, but COVID necessitated that. So then I could show the feasibility of conducting a fully remote study in the R21. That helped me, that gave the reviewers confidence that I can pull it off in an R01. So if R21 is feasibility innovation, R01 is about impact. So what is your impact and the definitive test, right? This is the one where you are going to test two interventions and actually tell what is your hypothesis, if one intervention is better or not. And then R21 is high risk, high reward. You don't need preliminary data for R21. But if you do provide preliminary data, they will be reviewed. So remember that. So if you have, and in my case, my R21 had preliminary data from P30. So that was reviewed. But if I didn't have it, it's okay because R21s are not supposed to have preliminary data. But for R01, you do need preliminary data. You need preliminary data on preliminary feasibility and efficacy. Again, for R21, the outcomes, they don't need to be statistically significant. Even if you can show positive trends, that's okay. But for the R01, your sample size should be powered such as to detect statistical significance. So R01 requires all of that preliminary data on team collaboration, on feasibility of the study design, and preliminary trends or outcome trends So R21 is for 2 years. R01 can be from 3 to 5 years. The total that you can request direct costs is $275, and in R01 it's $500 each year. So and you require that. I mean, and R21 is challenging because of that amount. And that is why, you don't need to have a lot of sample size. So types of R21 to R01 pipeline. So again, I'm biased towards intervention studies because that's what I do. But there are other kinds of R21 to R01 pipelines. And like I said in the beginning, right, when you're writing an R21, you're not just writing for the R21. Your success is most determined to get to R01 if you're already thinking of an R01 when you're writing an R21. So feasibility intervention trial is R01, R21 to fully powered trials, which is what I've been talking about. Pilot descriptive studies, because sometimes you even have exploratory studies, you have survey studies, you have like a lot of people collect biomarkers, digital health, EMAs. There are all this to describe a phenomenon, and you need a lot of sample to do that. And it's a very unique phenomenon that you're exploring, and that's not an intervention trial, that's a descriptive trial, and that's okay. So you can use R01 to sorry, you can use R01 to you can use R21 to pilot test the descriptive, like you're pilot testing your data collection, you're pilot testing your measures, and you're pilot testing your analysis and the T. And that is in the R21. And then your R01 is the fully powered multi-site big descriptive study. So, and then there is also other kinds where your pilot implementation trial, there are hybrid implementation effectiveness trials, where you kind of pilot tested in one clinical site, and then the R01 would be maybe a cluster randomized trial over multiple sites. So that's the way you can phase your R21 to R01 pipelines. So R21 specific aims are about debuting an idea or building an idea with preliminary conceptualization. And I've been talking about this. So my P30 project was just this very rudimentary basic game-based tool for older adults. And all it did was demonstrated that older adults are willing to play the game, and they actually preferred it, especially if they were not as educated and with increased in knowledge. So that was powerful finding, even though it did nothing in terms of outcomes, because I wasn't even collecting that. But the R21 was about building this whole idea of the sensor control digital game, the feasibility RCT, like that I, as a junior faculty, can conduct a randomized control trial, because a randomized control trial is tricky, rigorous, really difficult. But my R01 is so much better because I was able to make all kind of mistakes that I could in my R21. So and reviewers like to see that, right? And then you talk about that, like these are the mistakes I made in my R21, and this is how I'm improving my R01. But you can only say that with your if you've done a randomized control trials, like sincerely feasibility study. And all of that would inform the next steps. So typical R21 aims is to, in my case, it's design and develop an intervention for mobile smartphones informed by participant stakeholders, right? I mean, this is typical. You don't want to design something where the stakeholders have no perspective. So your first aim could be that. And your second aim, maybe your first aim could be just that, gathering the information from your participants, stakeholders. Second aim could be actually designing and developing. So you need to have like deliverable after every aim. So the deliverable after this specific aim one is an actual prototype. And the second one is the second aim is typically the feasibility efficacy aim, where the second aim is like the feasibility aim. So feasibility outcomes are very specific. You can use reach, aim, re-aim framework to influence or inform your selection of metrics. Usually they are most interested in recruitment, enrollment rates, retention rates, acceptability, and usability. So these are like the 5 top feasibility aims that are 21 that reviewers are most interested to see, that whether if your study would be successful in R01. And there are very metrics, right? It's most important if you say go, no go metrics. So your go, no go would be if retention rate was 75% or more, then R01 is a go. or if enrollment rates was 25% of your target population, it's a go. So you define those metrics in your R21, and then that gives you a very clear framework or protocol that this study is likely to be successful as an R01, and you present that to your reviewers. And then lastly is the efficacy aim. Again, just to compare trends, nothing about finding out the statistical significance or testing it. You cannot test two interventions in an R21. You're only comparing and finding out preliminary efficacy. So that's what so this is like a typical R21 aims. So like I said, milestones to include in your R21 is how many per month were screened, X per month were randomized, and what percentage of data collection was possible. If there are any mediators, then did it demonstrate change, and was it reliable? And most importantly, were recruitment benchmarks met, and then retention gaps were met. So these are all, this is why you're conducting your R21, to identify these milestones. So another important thing is to link publication. So, every time I have a publication from an R21, I have these links. I don't want to open up the links, but I'm happy to share this, and you can look at the links. But there are actually instructions where once you have at R21, you link it with my bibliography in ERA, I think it's NCBI. And then that will show up in your annual reports for R21. So you want to link all your publications from R21 to your annual report, to the grant, because then folks can see that you have been productive, and reviewers can see, and also program officers can see that you have been productive from your prior study. And I did talk about preprints. So if you've already written the article, but it's not going to be reviewed in time, explore the option of preprints. I think many journals do offer the option of preprints, so explore that. So to make a case for R01, this is the kind of idea is there is a gap. Why now? And therefore R01. So there is R01 is about the problem significance. Like I made the case for heart failure. What your R21 proved in your R01 specific aims, you're going to write that in my R21, we found that this was feasible. The methods were demonstrated. Our team had this expertise, and we collaborated together. And yet there still remains unknown. And in an intervention trial, that's very clear, because R01 is clearly going to be an efficacy trial, and an implementation trial. And that's why you need an R01 to conduct a fully powered study. So that's a very logical explanation for why you need an R01 after an R21. So R01 specific aims typically tend to be about testing the intervention with, this is serious. I mean, this is like you actually doing the study so you can confidently say if an intervention works or not. And so you want like a statistically powered sample size. You definitely want to talk about clinically meaningful delta, that is clinically meaningful change. Attrition assumptions, there's going to be participant attrition, especially in a population like heart failure. We do that. But as long as it's informed by the R21 data, you can account for that in your sample size. And you want a fully powered randomized control trial. So effectiveness, outcome, impact is powered, and patient-centered outcomes. Sorry, Chris, I'm sorry, I cannot see the time, so please keep me on time. Okay, thank you. So
you're doing good.
All right, thanks. So this is R01's typical R01 aims. The typical pattern is effectiveness, impact. Of course, you're testing the intervention versus a control group on improving a certain primary outcome for whatever time points that you're looking at, powered using R21, statistical information. And then sometimes you can also look at the mechanism or the mediators and moderators of the effects on of the intervention on the primary outcome. And then another R01 aim 3 would be, reviewers are most interested, right? Like we don't want that 17 years gap between evidence and practice. So how soon can this actually impact the clinical site or the population of interest? So perhaps you can have an aim about the reach adoption, opinion of stakeholders, barriers and facilitators to implement this intervention. And it could be just participants or it could be clinical providers. It all determines about what is most relevant to your program of research and what you have the most genuine access to. So significance in an R01 is definitely talks about rigor of prior research and weaknesses in prior research and how you're going to address it. Approach would be how your project study design is going to address weaknesses in prior research. Like how is your study above and beyond better than whatever has been done, not only in your R21, but also in the other studies in the scientific literature. A scientific rigor of your project, like a randomized control trial is obviously considered to be the gold standard. So how it is rigorous, but even if you're not doing that, if you're doing some other kind of trial, like that is the smart study design, what elements of your project makes your project rigorous. So you need to articulate that because you cannot assume that reviewers are going to understand it. You will have to articulate every little thing. Also, it's very important that biological variables, how are they being incorporated in your study design and how that is informing your data interpretation and data analysis. So avoid R21 re-aiming, right? You don't want to just reproduce your R21. You want to move beyond it. So the goal of R01 is to move beyond feasibility. Keep inter-aim independence low. So this should be the other one. If aim 1 dies, aim 2 still stands. That's how it should be, because if the one of the major reasons why I feel some of the proposals get tanked is because if aim 1 is not successful, then aim 2, there is no chance of continuing it. So that is why it's a problem. So you want it to be, so in the previous case, like over here, if you see that, you're doing a randomized control trial. So yes, that is one. But even if that doesn't work, you still have data and you can still get some data on, like, say, phenotyping or clustering or, finding out the mediators. You will still have the data. So these two are not necessarily dependent on each other. And lastly, you can always get feedback from the stakeholders, regardless of if your intervention works or not. So that is the way to kind of stack your aims such that they're not dependent on each other. And that's what I mean by this. Team considerations, very important, extremely important in R01. So you want a biosketch, you want to provide a story. It's really a story and it's fascinating. I mean, in my case, I can tell you, so my R21, my team consisted of me, my software engineering partner, I have a game developer, I had a behavioral expert, and a senior nurse scientist. So this was our team. And then we did that. But in my next study, I brought in some new team member who was like a biostatistician. And that's okay. Even though I didn't have a collaboration with the biostatistician, it was still okay because it fit in with the storyline. Like, this guy brought this unique expertise to our study that we will absolutely benefit, but majority of us have already collaborated. So that kind of looks good. So you want to have a story about how each person contributes to the conduct of the study, not because they are your colleagues or you want to do a favor on them. No, you have to be very specific exactly how is their expertise directly relevant to that particular study, and how are they going to help that. So definitely prior collaboration with team members helps. And like I mentioned, it's okay to bring in someone new. And I gave the example of the biostatistician in my case. So budget signals of readiness. Budget justification is very important. You may not think that it's a peripheral item, but a lot of your specific aims and study design, they get they are kind of cross-checked with your budget. Because if your budget doesn't have items that you say you're going to do in the study design, that's a ding. On the other hand, if your budget has items that you don't talk about it in the study design, that's a ding. So you got to really make sure like they align. So after you clean up all your proposal writing, budget justification is the thing that you have to pay attention. So signals of readiness is adequate personal months for coordination, data, and recruitment. You need to have sufficient GRA hours or project coordinator hours. You cannot have 20% for a large or for a project coordinator for a large study, right? So it has to be sensible. And a lot of the times when you've done your R21, this becomes easy. Like, you know exactly what you need for R01. Participant cost realism, travel, devices, if there is any translation, interpretation, installation cost, the amount of personnel that's needed to help install or work with participants to on the intervention. Sometimes there is group settings where you have an interventionist, and all of that needs to be factored in the budget justification. Also, reviewers are really paying attention to data and safety monitoring board. Like, for example, if yours is a clinical trial, then they absolutely want to see a data and safety monitoring board, or at least an independent monitor who's going to monitor your study. And so what is the cost for that? And also your data management and sharing infrastructure. That's also a really important aspect to consider in your R01. Timeline, quarterly grant map is great. You need to show that. You need to show really clear details about how you're ramping up. IRB, it should be IRB revisions, because technically by the time you're just in time includes IRB approval. So you cannot say like, I'm going to take 3-4 months to get IRB approval. That's a ding. So it can only be IRB revisions, and then hiring that may take like a month or two, and then and whatever you need, like, development time of your protocol, revision time, and then recruitment follow-up. And it really helps if you can show what we call participant accrual. That means attainment of recruitment milestones. So by year 1, I anticipate to recruit X number of people. By year 2, this. So that all that just demonstrates confidence that you can pull off the study. So common R01 pitfalls is underpowered primary outcome. I would say 80% is the norm, but really try to estimate it 85% or 90 if you can. Too many co-primaries, it's tempting to add a lot, but don't. Magical recruitment plans without numbers, partnerships, or budget. So you may say that, oh, I'm going to recruit 300 people from local clinics, but there is nothing in the letter of support that shows that you have some kind of partnership or collaboration or support from the clinical site that's going to provide you with those numbers. So all of that matters. The letter of support really matters there. Over complexity, that strips team capacity. So if you have really over complex aims that where the team expertise doesn't match, that's a problem. And then forgetting implementation or real world fit. That is, again, I mentioned about that. So let R21 evidence set your R01 assumptions, because you have to make assumptions in your any grant proposal. But because this topic is about how to go from an R21 to R01, it's like you're really letting your R21 guide. I sometimes feel that R21 is really tough to get because R01 is easier, or even writing the grant is easier because a lot of the things you already know, it's coming from the R21. And then use numbers from your R21, such as enrollment pace, retention, adherence to set your R01 assumptions. Oh, I'm done. So I kind of sped past through it, but I am happy to take any questions you may have in the time we have.
Thanks, Dr. Radhakrishnan. You're right on time. I think we have about 30 minutes for a Q&A for anyone that will have questions for you.
Yeah, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I saw that you did an R21 for an intervention. Is there a reason that you used an R21 versus an R34? The aims that you listed for the R21 were very similar to R34 aims that I've used in the past.
That's a great question. Actually, I spoke with my program officer and they advised me writing an R34. They said that I don't know if it's a right advice or not, and maybe different ICs have different priorities. But my IC mentioned that R34s required in that IC required like a very like me to be in a medical center with a strong lab and a strong mentoring team. So it may not be a good fit. So it was specific, but you're right. R34 is another mechanism that could also be explored for intervention and feasibility trials.
Thank you.
I see a comment. Okay, so patenting and intellectual property on the, yeah, that's a good question. No, I have been working on the patenting and the intellectual property. That's a completely side issue. So another way is from the R21, we could have also done like an SBIR, STTR. That is like a business development grant. But I don't know. I just didn't have the bandwidth. I was thinking more as a researcher. And when you want to be an entrepreneur, I probably needed like a dedicated postdoc or some business student who was going to take it and run it. And I was more leaning on the side that I need evidence before I can do anything. So I didn't have the heart to pursue that until I saw evidence myself if that was going to work or not. I mean, that is my honest answer. But it's not like I didn't explore it. I have explored patenting. And we decided that because the ideas were kind of extant in the literature for a while, we do have it copyrighted. So we have that. But when the idea was already out there for more than a year before, we got there. So that is a problem of being too efficient because I'd already published on it a year before. So the patenting opportunity was out. But there are other opportunities.
Could I ask one question?
Yes.
So I know it seems like you are working with the technology industrial company for your project. And whenever I work with those kind of company, the initial budget is different than I have to pay later because I have to edit something. So how
Right.
did you handle those things for the budget wise?
Good question. No, I did not work with a company actually. I have had this collaborator. This person was working in our university, and then he spun off. So I have a long-standing collaboration with this. It was an individual game developer, and really good. So it was more like we had like this long-standing collaboration, and that person stuck to the budget. So I didn't have those issues, but I can understand the challenges. I think it is good. I will confess something. I do have a master's in engineering, so I kind of understand the limitations of technology, right? If you don't, I would say get someone who can understand and tell you like is this promise or their promise realistic or not, and is a promise realistic to be deployed in that budget, right? So you may need like a second opinion when it comes to like dealing with outside industrial developers with whom you have no connection or trust. So I would definitely go for a second opinion for questions like that.
Yeah, hi, Kavita. This is Darcy. I'm sorry. Nice to see you. And also thanks for the great presentation. It was very helpful. I have two questions. One thing is that this might be very simple. You might be thinking. First thing is about the retention rate. And you said you've been on the reviewer panel for NIH. Is there a typical retention rate that they're looking for, based on your pilot study?
It's very specific to your population, right? Like some population, like again, heart failure retention rates are hard, tough. And so typically 80% retention rate is considered okay. So 20% loss is okay, even though that is but you need justification, right? So if you say that I anticipate 80% retention, you kind of need to justify, which is good for this kind of population. But for some other populations, maybe a 90% retention rate would be preferable. For some, it may be even, typically, I don't think you want to go below 75. That's like the benchmark, because then they don't want to fund it, right? Because if you're going to lose a lot of people. So I wouldn't want to go, but the thing is, for any number that you're putting in your proposal, you've got to have justification and rationale as to why you're citing that number.
And my second question is, and I think you mentioned that with R21, did you have to submit it 3 times? So,
Yeah.
and for R01, how many times? Do you mind
1 time.
sharing it? Once? That's awesome.
I got it.
Okay, thank you.
I was very lucky. I got it, and then I got my second R01 within 6 months. It was just the weirdest thing. So
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So my point is, like, I learned a lot in my multiple rejections of R21 that I could just go strong in my R01, and I just got picked up.
Okay, thank you.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Dr. Radhakrishnan, this is Jyotsana. Thank you for such a great presentation. I joined late, so I don't know if I missed you talking about this, but can you speak a little bit on grant and personal management, and how different does it look in an R21 versus, an R01, and what are some, advice you have for emerging scholars like me too?
Oh, that's a great question. So R21 is a lot of me, because there is no budget. I didn't have a project coordinator. I was, again, very fortunate that I had a 20-hour GRA who was great, fantastic. But and then we could, but even then, she is not the project coordinator. I am the project coordinator. So R21 is a lot of work, because I'm doing everything, and then plus you don't get buyouts, right? Because it's not enough. What in my university, I could kind of combine my buyouts and get to release one of the semester, not both the semesters. But yeah, so I did a lot of the project coordination, but I felt that was good because I learned a lot, right? I think I got my hands dirty enough that I knew about the data collection, the different data collection means, and all of that. And because I was a project coordinator, but I would try to delegate. So I would say, as an emerging faculty, you can do it all. Learn to delegate, and your delegation could be, there are a lot of students who love to volunteer on these projects, especially undergrad researchers, especially those kids who want to go to med school. They like to have these health services research and have some publications or whatever. So sometimes they can volunteer. I have had volunteer students who come and help me and taken on some of the load. And then GRAs, graduate research assistants, are good. So that's what happened in R21. But for my R01, I mean, I had the money to pay for a full-time project coordinator, but then I could really train her because I had my experience as an R21. So I feel like my R01 was conducted, to my satisfaction, because of all the lessons I learned from my R21. So I hope that helps. I mean, it's really hard. R21 is hard, but it's worth it. And just learn to leverage student resources as much as you can.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I have an R15 and I'm in the thick of it. I don't have a
Yes.
project coordinator and I'm doing everything, but I think it will be very helpful moving forward
Absolutely.
in
Yeah.
additional research projects. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Dr. Radhakrishna, for the
Hi.
great presentation. And it is so insightful about your journey, what you explained. I have one question that is not regarding your topic. The current trend now, what is, as you are serving in the reviewer panel, how much they are, considering the minority population research? That is my question right now.
I don't know. I don't want to comment on that. I can tell you one thing though. I am like an ADR. I think with enough justification and rationale is what it's provided. Having said that, we all know what the environment is. My thing is, it is hard. And if you want to think about everything that's going on, it's easy to get distracted and it's easy to lose focus. And again, it's personality. And as a person, I I feel like I can't afford to do that. And then I try to have like, you know, what you call like the horses thing, like you want to just see your path. I know that it's not necessarily helpful and, you know, needed in this day and age. But the thing is that science matters. And then what matters is your impact on your population. So as long as you have justification, and I think in this current environment, it's true that focusing on just one single population may not cut it, you know, because the study section reviewers may, the study section is behaving exactly what they did from before, but I don't know what's happening at the council side, right? I mean, now, even now, like it's not going to ICs anymore. It is going to a centralized CSR. So ICs are not reviewing your what the study section reviews. It's going to a centralized CSR who decide. I don't know what happens at that stage, right? I mean, that is something we are working with a lot of speculation. So when there is so much speculation, you can get crippled. So what can you do? You can work with only what you know best. So what you want to work best, and I think knowing the thing, I think one is to have maybe see that you can reframe it for a general population. And then again, it really likes your population gets benefited regardless of what. And then the basics of the science and the basics of conducting the science still say the same. So as long as you're sticking to it, it is still a worthwhile journey, and it might still work, you know, you might still get funded. So that is what I would say. And that's what I tell my faculty too, is that, I mean, you got to do what you got to do for what you believe in and for your impact. And sometimes you just got to have some focus, but otherwise it's so easy to get distracted in this day and age.
Thank you so much, Dr. Radhakrishnan.
Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Krishnan, before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you really quick for every career faculty, especially when it comes to preliminary data, you know, even though R21s would say preliminary data is not required. What is your recommendations on that?
It's hard to say. I mean, reviewers are very strongly being told preliminary data are not required. But like I said, if you do provide preliminary data, then it will be reviewed. It depends on the topic, right? Like, for example, if the kind of methods you're using, like, you know, say EMA, digital health, that other people have already provided preliminary data, you can use that. You don't need to necessarily have preliminary data. But on the other hand, if you're collecting some esoteric measure, there needs to be some evidence that it is feasible, right? Like either through somebody else's research or something. So it really depends on how it's a very, I'm sorry, but it's a very depends kind of question. So if it's a very if it's something that is fairly everyone does it, you know, and then you have some evidence, it's okay. I don't know. It's a hard call. It really depends on it's a very individual case by case basis kind of answer, you know.
Thank you so much. We're so grateful to have you, Dr. Krishnan. And if there's any question, please feel free to send, and we might share it with Dr. Krishnan as her time permits. She can respond to those individually, and we'll share it. The recording will be saved and shared via SNRS platform for individuals who might need access to that. We do have another webinar that is in line with this topic from the ADDR rig, which will be scheduled, I believe, in November. That will be sent out as well. Other than that, thank you all so much for coming, and thank you for supporting the presentation by Dr. Krishnan.
I just have a quick question. People are asking if they can email me professional email contact, and I'll say yes, they can. They just have to find me online. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you all. We appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Dr. Krishnan. Thank you so much for your time.
Bye.